So, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on scientism and Islamic thought. So, myself and Subboor, we're going to be co-presenting this. This is meant to be a very relaxed conversation. Subboor and I are friends, and we just wanted to kind of give you an overview about what to expect from the course. And meanwhile, feel free to ask any questions. We will have a dedicated Q&A, but we'll be happy to take in questions as we go along. Subboor, salams. How are you and where are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. I'm actually in the UK, which is good news.
Where were you before? You were in Africa, right? Before?
Yeah, I was in Latin America and then I was in Africa. And now I'm going back to Latin America on Wednesday. So that's why the timings of it. But you caught me at the right time because I'm back in the UK right now.
Alhamdulillah, very good. Is this the IR office? Are you in the IR office?
No, this is another office.
Another office. Okay, alhamdulillah, very good. Alhamdulillah, very good. All right. And what's the latest gupshup? Any new programs, any new things, activities coming up?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a lot going on. Currently, we're looking to expand in a big way in Latin America. That's like a big focus. There's lots of people who've shown interest in Islam there. There's not enough Muslims out there giving dawah. So there's a conference we're going to be attending next week, which is going to be a conference of different organizations coming together just for Latin America in Quito. So the conference is on how we can grow Islam, how we can take care of new Muslims, how we can essentially push the dawah forward.
Very good. And on that point, we can then hopefully land into the conversation of scientism. So Subboor, we came together and we devised this course between us, and hopefully we're going to run it for the first time through Balagh Academy. So enlighten us, Subboor. What is scientism, or just, what's a working definition of scientism, and why do we need a dedicated space for this?
Right. I think that's an excellent question. It takes me back to a conversation I just had a few days ago with somebody, which anybody can watch on YouTube. And the reason why I want to point out this conversation is because I've never met this guy before. And when we came to speaking about very important topics, which are metaphysical, which are philosophical, which are theological, he kept referring to science. He kept saying, what's the scientific evidence for that? Things which were even that should have been adjudicated using pure philosophy or mathematics. He kept trying to say there needs to be empirical evidence for this. So this is a conversation you can watch on Sam Dawah YouTube channel. It's between myself and someone called Nicholas at Speaker's Corner. So this conversation, which lasted about an hour, everything about his epistemology began and ended with science. So he didn't use the word scientism, but he said, I'm an empiricist. But when it came to anything, it was like, there has to be scientific evidence. So I think we can define scientism as an excessive trust in the scientific method, which goes beyond its remit in such a way that all of your epistemology, or a large part of it, is empirical. And things which shouldn't be empirical are shoved are shoved aside as not important, or they will be adjudicated one day, they will be sorted out by science. So that's the working sort of definition I would stick with.
Right. Okay. And so, you've been in the dawah field, and I'm assuming that you've encountered a lot of people that kind of fit in everything into this science-only box, right? How prevalent is this, and how do you kind of counter it?
Yeah, I would say this is everywhere. It's universal. I can go back to the
Muslim communities, yeah? Even across Muslim communities.
I mean, I think Muslims, because of colonization, are probably more prone to scientism than sometimes people in the West, because people in the West, especially the ones who are literate, they can go beyond that. But because even our way of thinking, just think of a very simple way of, think of a very simple example. A typical Muslim household in Egypt, Pakistan, Turkey, Nigeria, they would like their children to be doctors, lawyers, engineers. No one would say philosopher, sociologist, theologian, even artist, right? It's not there. It's all, we still have that ghetto mindset of just focusing on certain things. So in a way, crude scientism can be found probably in its worst forms in the Muslim world because of colonization. And you will also find it here in the West. But I think people in certain quarters are definitely literate enough to rise above it. But at a grassroots level, it's still there. So that's why I pointed out to the example in Speaker's Corner. But the earliest time I can think of when I encountered this type of scientism during a Dawah conversation was in 2011. I was at a gaming cafe, right? It's a gaming cafe / internet cafe back in the days when, you know, you didn't have internet on your phone. You used to just go to these cafes. So I used to use the cafe to, you know, check my emails and stuff. So then I went to the counter, spoke to the guy, very nice guy, and I said to him, just wanted to sort of get a conversation going. So I said, "Do you believe in God?" And he goes, "I believe in science." And he just paused, and I felt like what he was trying to convey to me is, you're coming from a religious perspective. I'm just sort of subtly telling you, like, I'm in a different realm. I'm not going to believe any of that stuff because I believe in this higher epistemology, this higher way of looking at things. So obviously he didn't answer my question, do you believe in God? But it just goes to show that sometimes, purely by stating they believe in science, their assumption is, therefore I don't believe in God. I mean, that's what he's implicitly saying. I don't believe in God because I believe in science. So this is literally everywhere. And I've had hundreds of conversations with people over the years. And I can easily say majority of agnostics in the West at a grassroots level have some form of scientism in them.
Right. So you've given us an example of perhaps an agnostic or an atheist. What about Muslims? How does it come across in Muslim circles?
Well, I think,
I mean, our video kind of indicated to that about my own experience, but I want you to give me another example.
Yeah. I mean, the way I would put it down to is, we are always looking for a scientific justification for fasting. We're looking for a scientific justification for not eating pork. One of the ones I heard a few years ago, I thought was really funny. You know, somebody said, "Oh, you know, pork, right? It's haram because, you know, if you leave it outside, it rots and you get maggots." So it's like, what meat doesn't rot and have maggots? Like, just why can't we just say it's haram because, you know, Allah said it's haram? There must be wisdom. We may or may not know it. So that's one thing. But I think another way of thinking about it is the whole scientific miracles, you know, issue. So the Quran says apparently that the universe is expanding. The Quran says, you know, something about the oceans, which we didn't know. So why is it that when it comes to the linguistic miracle of the Quran, the sociological miracle of the Quran, the predictions of Prophet, they are not seen as good enough? But what is seen as good enough is the Quran has made scientific claims which are now coming true. And even today, despite you know, the stuff you've published on this, Hamza's work, despite all of that, it's still everywhere. I go to a mosque, I see scientific miracles in the Quran. You see a talk, scientific miracles in the Quran. So I would say that's one clear example. Another clear example is evolution. That, you know, we have to, you know, continuously look for scientific critiques of evolution, and we're not happy you know, looking at the philosophy side of things or theology side of things or looking at other angles. So I would say the Muslim world is definitely suffering from scientism, and even Muslims who believe and acknowledge that science is not the be all and end all, they will still be committed to some form of scientism despite them making this qualification. So that's been my experience, that it's very hard to shake off. It's like worse than Corona.
Well, I think that most of the Muslim circles, they usually go in for the STEM subjects, right? And in a lot of the STEM fields, you're not taught philosophical thinking or theological thinking. And as a result of that, you get locked into this kind of machinery where even the very idea of miracles becomes quite absurd. The fact that some of the things that we encounter in the Quran become open to question. And so you kind of get this hidden curriculum embedded in you, right? That's not really taught at the surface, but it's kind of there in the culture's in the air, as you say. And I think that constant reinforcement of that embedded culture really, I think, permeates all across the Muslim society, which is why I think as a reaction to that, we're now seeing an increase of Islamic schools where the Islamic ethos, Islamic teachers, and Islamic principles are being embedded, Al-Balagh Academy being, one of them. I think that's one of the reactions, the societal reactions that we're seeing. Would you say that's true in your experience?
I would say that's true, but we can also do we can do a pH test, we can do a litmus test, we can see the reaction of Muslims to certain things, and that gives us an insight into their psyche. So, like I said before, if a Muslim is studying, something science related, and then they decide, actually, I'm not going to study science, I want to look at, I want to look at the classic medieval Islamic philosophy side of things, right? Something which is theologically maybe even heavier than some of the, if you're just looking at, I don't know if you want to study zoology or whatever, right? It's much deeper. Or, somebody like yourself who, goes from a science background, is essentially a scientist, and switches over to the theology side of things. People see it as almost going from, class A to class C. This is a downgrade, as opposed to, wait a minute, these are two different, things, and they both have their places. So I would say another way of looking at it is why Muslims with little Islamic theological backgrounds, but they have some form of a scientific background. If we broaden out scientific to mean like medical fields as well, why are they taken so seriously? So here I'm thinking of Dr. Israd Ahmed, I'm thinking of Dr. Zakir Naik. I'm not knocking them in any way. I'm not saying anything bad about them. I'm just saying, why is it that when somebody says, okay, so this person is a Islamic scholar, fantastic, they studied, fantastic, but he has a medical degree. Now, the medical degree does not help you in deciding about, a particular fiqh ruling or whatever it is, right? But somehow it's seen as credibility in the Muslim community. And that, again, is part of that scientism issue. And
where a PhD is worth more than a sheikh today. That's what it.
Absolutely. But also, I think one of the things which we sort of neglect, right? We sort of neglect this this element of things, is that Islamic thinking is really deep, right? So if we go back and we look at medieval Islamic philosophy and even some philosophers today, Shabir Akhtar being, a prime example, look at their reception in the world. Now, this is something I was thinking about, because I was very fond of Shabir Bhai. I only, was introduced to him maybe 2-3 years ago, about 2 years ago, actually.
Shabir Akhtar, right?
Yes, yeah. So, his writings and his way of thinking and everything was phenomenal. He was not received by the Muslim community as he should have, right? As he should have been received. One of the things I used to say to him, and actually Hamza said to him as well, is that Hamza said to him, we're going to make you a household name. That was the sort of thing that Hamza wanted to do with the guy. Now, the thing is, it's not going to happen, because Muslims writ large are going to look at his credentials, which is Shabir Akhtar is a philosopher, Oxford trained, but he's a philosopher. If he had a degree in chemistry and just a bachelor's, I'm sorry to say, maybe he would have had a bigger standing in the Muslim community as a public speaker and debater, as opposed to a philosophy background. So it was really sad to see that even when someone's made it, I mean, Shabir Bhai definitely made it. He was on the theology faculty at Oxford, nonetheless. And despite this, even his death, I mean, we did have, Cat Stevens and, certain people tweeting about him, but generally the Muslim world did not realize who they lost. This very office where I'm in, he was sitting here just last year, and we were doing some filming, and now he's gone. And for me, I see this as we lost a mountain. But for the vast majority of Muslims, even Muslims who are, literate and even maybe Islamically trained, they don't even know this mountain existed. They don't even know this man existed. And for me, that's incredibly sad.
We're actually doing a special issue on him with the American Journal of International Society of Islam, something like that. AGIS is the name. as like a 5 shift special in his honor. So that should be coming out, inshallah, a year's time from now. But I agree with you that that was a huge loss for the Muslim world. I think his writings were very penetrating. But I think that we're also, I think, missing another ingredient here, and that is the recent movement of new atheism that I think kind of spiraled this whole conversation into a new frenzy, right? This was sharply after 9/11, 2006. You've got the Big Four. They started publishing their books. How much damage do you think that they caused to the Muslim world?
I think the best way to summarize it is what Christopher Hitchens said during an interview. He said, the only ones fighting the Muslims are the American army and us, right? So, like, he was very clear that it was a war on Islam. And in fact, we can say new atheism, even in its genesis, was a reaction to 9/11, right? And the God delusion, the failed hypothesis, God is not great, you name, it's going to have a lot of references to Islam. So new atheism needs an enemy, right? So it was a positive feedback loop. Not only was it that Islam sparked that type of new atheism, but Christians writ large weren't making that, weren't really holding on to their values, weren't even visible here in the West. So not only did it start off as a reaction to, 9/11, it then needed a punching bag to show, oh, this is why you need us, because these guys do this and these guys do that. I think it pushed Muslims to come up with a reaction. And then when they looked around, what did look kind of useful, because it was there in the corner, was science in the Quran, scientific miracles. So they're like, oh, okay, why don't we use this? In fact, I think the use of scientific miracles in the Quran went through a point of inflection in the early 2000s. I actually think it did, because I remember when I was at university, it really took off, right? It really took off. So I think 9/11 and the link between 9/11, new atheism, and then the reaction to that, because we saw really high-end productions in terms of the science in the Quran stuff and lectures and talks. And it wasn't just, Harun Yahya and Zakir Naik and, the people that we usually think of. It was even people giving talks at their local mosque, and they've expanded upon it. There's a guy in Egypt, I've forgotten his name, Egyptian professor. Najjar. Yes, I remember he went in deep. So everybody was doing this. And even I remember, and I'm not going to take the name of the Islamic scholar, but, they were Islamic personalities, let's just say, who, it was just like taking Zakir Naik's stuff, copy, paste, put their name on it, print in large numbers. Everybody was doing this. It's literally everywhere. Very few people were willing to actually challenge it. And I also saw at the time what was popular on YouTube was what you single-handedly debunked, which was the whole, Muslims came up with the Mohammedan theory of evolution. It was well known and established from beforehand. And, and we have, I've forgotten the name of the Algerian, Nidal, right? Nidal Boussami. Like, even he was referring to this, and he's an actor, right? Even he was referring to this this stuff, and I actually believed it at one point. I think your paper, was the sort of the last final nail in that coffin. But that stuff was again a reaction to new atheism. Okay, what are we going to do about evolution? Okay, we're going to do this. I think it also accelerated liberalism in the Muslim world, because the Muslims not only had to intellectually liberalize, and then you had movements such as accepting the standard Darwinian no exceptions model, Rana Dejani, for example. And then you had other types of supposed think tanks in the West that were liberalizing Islam as well. So I think from a moral perspective and a theological perspective, there was definitely links, in the same way that Christopher Hitchens mentioned that the American army was doing the physical stuff and the new atheism was doing the intellectual stuff. And I don't think he was wrong, because I think that was what their intent was.
Wow. So we have a question here that I think sounds that's related to exactly what we've said, which we can, I think, take on. So Zaki is asking, are there any books or articles written by Muslim scholars critiquing the Four Horsemen? What do you reckon? Subboor?
I think people, I mean, I remember coming across stuff, I can't remember the authors. Generally, people, I mean, there wasn't really that much of a written response in the form of books in the early period. I remember Asadullah, Asadullah was doing some fantastic work on this, Andalusi, and then Abdullah Andalusi, they were doing fantastic work, and then obviously Hamza was doing some great stuff on this. There were others. There was actually one guy, I've forgotten his name. He's an Arab brother, and he did some really good stuff on this. So there were some efforts, but I would say generally it took a long time for Muslims to react. There obviously debates started taking place. You had lots of these types of things happening, but I wouldn't say there was that much written at the time. It was kind of late.
Yeah, I think that, by contrast, I think Christian scholars are on it, as they usually are. And I mean, thousands, hundreds, if not thousands, right, of books were on Amazon.
I remember one of the quickest responses. It's one of the books which I just can't shake off because it's so small, but it's decisive. It's like The God Delusion came out, Alistair McGrath, the Dawkins
Twilight of Atheism, right? Twilight of Atheism.
Twilight of Atheism was good, but the Dawkins Delusion, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So him and his wife, they wrote this, and it's so small, but it was literally like a dagger. It was so powerful. And Michael Roos, I think he wrote the foreword for that as well. But that's the thing, time is of the essence, right? So we jumped on this years later, but the Christians just and why did they do this, Shoaib? I think this is what's important, and I really want to highlight something, right? There's something me and you talk about privately, but I don't think these conversations should be just private. We don't have Muslim intellectuals. We don't have Muslim publishing houses. We don't have Muslims in academia. So when something does happen, we're not there. When Tom Holland came up with this stuff about the Quran and, the Channel 4 documentary and all of that stuff happened, right? You had a whole infrastructure ready that if something came out against the Christian community, they would have responded. There was almost nothing from the Islamic perspective. There were, people doing individual efforts. So we don't have that entire ecosystem of support in academia. And I believe, you're making some serious inroads, but you're not going to be effective when you are going to be, so we're not going to be effective as a Muslim community when we have one or two people like yourself, when the Christian community literally has hundreds of thousands of people. And, even sometimes I think due to social media, people, I was talking to this academic who really likes your Facebook posts and, the books that you post and stuff like this. And, there can be this impression, okay, something's happening, we have people like Shoaib, we have these people doing their stuff, but it's actually not true, because they are so big and so vast, and they have a myriad of strategies and tactics to basically dominate the intellectual realm in academia. The atheists have their section, the Christians have their section, and we literally have very few individuals focusing on this. Very, very few individuals. You find a few on Twitter here and there, and they do work together, they do help each other, but I would say we are, right at the embryological stage of this Muslim revival. And it's going to definitely take us some decades. I don't think it's going to be like, next 2-3 years, things are going to happen.
Yeah, I think that the key point that you hit here is that we lack an infrastructure. And I think that's a key thing. Like if you look at, for example, William Lane Craig, he's at Biola University, right? That's a university where they train MSc students, PhD students in things like Christianity and science. Like you have university degree graduates who can get jobs after that, right? I think we're still kind of lacking that kind of solid infrastructure with top tier training, with top tier, precision, that kind of thing. And I think that is yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean the biggest proof is what people have to do in order to defend the Islamic worldview, expand upon its ideas. So yourself, you're working on, you did stuff on evolution, they did stuff on AI, recently did some stuff on UFOs. So the thing is, because no one else is doing it, you kind of have to just jump fields. But if there was lots of Muslims, you'd get into a niche and then a super niche, and then you'd really focus. And that's something which we have to understand, that just because we have papers being published in each particular area, it's still the surface level. If you look at, how deep Christian thought has evolved compared to us, when I think it was the Pope in the 90s, or it could have been even earlier, when he basically said, so we can accept the evolution of everything except the mind, right? And, so something like this. I don't remember exactly what his edict was. What was interesting is they had Catholic academics who were working out, how the hell do we challenge this, right? And what they came to basically realize, let's basically have this one area that we can use as our pocket of resistance, which is consciousness, human consciousness. Everything else is possibly up for grabs. So when they came up with this edict, they had a future-proof mindset. Let's not fight this battle right now. Let's just give this edict, right? And let's just have this thing going for us. Likewise, another person that comes to mind is Jonathan Wells. Jonathan Wells first did a PhD in his 40s on what is the main problem between Darwinism and Christianity, right? What is the crux of the issue? Then his next PhD was from Berkeley, in which he focused on that particular issue. So, we have these specialist people in the Christian community who are really working hard. And many of us, I would say, benefit from their work because we don't have the equivalent. Yet there's problems which are particular to the Muslim world, which don't exist. So, for example, we can, whether we agree with them or not, young earth creationism all the way to, Francis Collins' school of thought, no exceptions, right? There's a broad range of things that Muslims can tap into and look at, okay, what's here, how is this going on, right? But the Christians are not going to be doing work on the preservation of the Quran. The Christians are not going to be doing work on UFOs, for example, because we have a very different perspective. We lack those intellectuals, right? We really lack them. The good thing is we don't have the Christian baggage. The Christian baggage and the history of science, for them is that, there were times of a lot of tension, a lot of difficulty, some persecution going on. In the Muslim world, we had people who say Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the 90% of the Ummah, the Orthodox Muslims would say are heretics, right? Yet these heretics still flourished. They contributed. They were not killed, right? They were still there. So, we have particular problems which we need to solve. Scientism is definitely one of those things. And I believe wherever we are, we have to go with what we have. So currently, whatever we have, we're trying to make the best of it. But until there's a collective raising of awareness of the problem that we're facing intellectually, then we're not going to make progress. And I just want to make one point to really drive this home. Darwinism, secularism, or any of these types of philosophy, even feminism, they all started in the intellectual circles. And the vast majority of the Victorians at that time, they couldn't care less. Well, Darwin, this, that, who cares? Over decades, it went down to the grassroots. So these ideas, whether it's Marxism or Darwinism or feminism, these ideas begin off at the intellectual, and then they go all the way to the grassroots. We are thinking, no, who cares? These are only, discussions being had at an academic level. And, the average Muslim is happy praying in a mosque. Why should we get? No, you don't understand. There's a trickle-down effect, right? There's a trickle-down effect. And even in a place like Pakistan, Sir Sayyid Khan is taught in every single, school, and he's seen as a role model. He's definitely, I don't know, Shoaib, whether you agree or disagree with me. I think he's definitely fell into scientism, right?
I think that's an opinion held across the board. I think that's an opinion across the board.
Yeah, but in Pakistan, he's such a illustrious figure. You can't say anything against the guy. You know, it's seen as heretical. So, you know, we have to understand no one's going to escape the problem of scientism. Our children, grandchildren, everyone's going to be affected by it.
Right, right. Good. Okay. There's a question here by Natalie. She's saying, I think this might be just because of the terminology. We didn't explain it. Is there something wrong with the four horsemen? Sounds like pretty sound advice to me. So I think we need to clarify who the four horsemen are in this conversation.
Yeah, the four horsemen are essentially four figures of new atheism: Dawkins, Dennett, Hitchens, and
Harris.
Harris. Yes.
Yeah, so that's the name, and they've been given that just like you have the four horsemen in the Bible. So these are like counter movement from the atheist side, and that's what is referred to in the literature as the four horsemen. There's a question here by Ahmed 𝐁𝐚𝐥𝐚𝐝. Do you see any kind of connection between new atheism and postmodernism? Subboor, what do you reckon?
Maybe new atheism is a reaction, a challenge to postmodernism, because if you look at new atheism, they were pretty categorical in their claims, and postmodernism is definitely not about being categorical. So I would say it may be a reaction. I don't think that postmodernism was fueling new atheism, because, you know, when it comes to especially moral claims, new atheists were very absolutist about certain things. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We have another question here. Well, Natalie said, thank you for clarifying. She said that they're four horsemen in marriage advice. So I think this is a conflation of terms, right? Abu Bakr is asking, hang on, I just want to make sure I missed nothing. Yeah, Abu Bakr is asking, what's the area of conversation and diversion between scientism and Islam? How's that happening? Is anything being developed? Hang on. Actually, that reminded me. When's your book coming out? The Failed Hypothesis. When? This is like a 3-year promise you mentioned. When is that coming out?
You know, I'm not going to make any more commitments to date, but it's literally been. I mean, I became the CEO of IERA last year, but before that, a lot of
pray for Subboor, mashallah. He got a big position, mashallah.
Yeah. It's been difficult. I mean, even signing up to this webinar, right, and the series of webinars, you know, it was like, okay, I'm going to commit to this, but I'm going to have to juggle things around. I'm going to have to, because it is very, very difficult. But one thing that did happen with me, and I'm glad I didn't publish the book, say 4 years ago or 3 years ago. My approach actually evolved, and it still is evolving. And now I believe it's just about putting pen to paper, because previously, when it came to the entire approach of challenging evolution to now, it went from massively critiquing it from a scientific perspective to pretty much moving away from that and focusing on the critique of scientism, and then going down the route of the philosophy of evolution. And when it comes to, say, things like universal common ancestry, understanding obviously this is a challenge when it comes to Adam alayhi salam, but actually my shift was that the biggest problem we're facing is not universal common ancestry, it's actually naturalism. It's actually the Darwinian mechanism supposedly explaining things without reference to anything supernatural. So I think those things are
That's not specific to evolution. That's for every science. Naturalism can be the metaphysical capture any science, just evolution.
Yeah, but I think in evolution, it's been used more.
It's the main weapon.
I mean, I would say a lot of Muslims are a lot more nuanced about this than they were 20 years ago. I mean, 20 years ago, I think most Muslims were very close to the young earth creationism stuff. So, you know, they would even challenge, you know, whale evolution and, you know, the wolf dog and all of that kind of stuff. Everything would be, you know, up for grabs. But I think now Muslims are a lot more sophisticated, a lot more nuanced, and definitely thanks to the work that you've done as well, it's opened up people's minds and hearts to, you know, just how sophisticated of an answer we have. When I was at Exeter doing the PhD, when my professor asked me question, I mean, we got talking about God, we got talking about, naturally you are, I'm a Muslim and he's not, and we're just talking and stuff, and so we're talking about certain things, and then it came to the very uncomfortable area of, okay, so like, what do you accept about evolution, not accept, the conversation is going that way. So I gave I gave him the Islamic concept of the creation of Adam, but then I said to him, oh, here's my friend who's written a book and it's published by Routledge, and here you go. So it gave an air of credibility to an answer which usually they would just dismiss. They would just be like, just very dismissive of it. But having that, I think definitely helps. And that's what we want to do with every area, Shoaib. We want to do that with every single area, every single problem of scientism. Consciousness, for example, that's a big thing. That's one of the conversations I was also having with this Nicholas guy, because he thought consciousness is purely empirical. And in fact, he couldn't even understand what I was saying initially when I was trying to explain to him, you can't just, for you to say consciousness has to be empirical, you already made a assumption about what consciousness is. But for him, because scientism was so deeply ingrained, he couldn't see that. It's almost like he was colorblind. That's why the conversation actually went on for a very long time.
Right.
There's another agnostic, funnily enough, who was there, whose name is Tony. And he jumped in. I've spoken to him a few times before. So he jumped in to explain to him, Nicholas, that actually he's right. You're making assumptions about consciousness. And yeah, that's the thing. Scientism is so hard to unbrainwash yourself. Once that, that cognitive architecture has been downloaded, it's very hard to shake it off.
Yeah. So what's the answer to the question, bro? We went on like a historical tour. So what's the area of conversation and diversity?
I actually have a habit of doing that. What was the question again?
So are there, I think the fundamental purpose of the question is where do we stand in terms of productions of materials? I think we can say that, this course is at least one attempt to give some kind of academic backbone to Islam and scientism. How can we look at it? But what about in terms of works out there?
Yeah, I mean, years ago when I was looking at stuff, and even now, I don't think there's much. Even this course is rare. You will not find this type of course anywhere. Like, just go on the internet, you'll find all types of course. This is very unique. And in terms of,
he's not getting paid. Relax, guys. He's
no, the thing is, when something is like, I recently there was the Apple launch of the iPhone 15, right? So there was a massive, I don't know, 10,000 plus, I don't know how many people were watching this live, right? And every single thing, we've got this new chip, we've got this. People automatically view, oh, okay, there's a lot of people watching, so therefore there's going to be, there's something very important going on. It's normal. A lot of viewership, something important going on. Here, what do we have? We have like 50 people probably. Yeah, 85 people, right? And then me and you. And then, it's very unassuming. People just think, oh, it's it's just a webinar. But we are actually, what we're really trying to do through this course and others is wake up Muslims so they understand there is a huge need. There is a huge gap. This is something which is going to affect society. And it's very hard to do that when the numbers are so low, because then other people, it's like social proof. They think, if this is so important, why aren't all the ulama talking about it? Why isn't this happening? In fact, funnily enough, this is really funny. I got a message today. And when I get more details, inshallah, I'm going to get you to come with me, because you were with me in Pakistan last time. I got an invitation from somebody who is with an organization, and he is liaising with the Pakistan government, and they want to come together to bring together all the madrasas and the major institutions and do something on new atheism.
Ooh.
Yes. And government, this is like government level stuff. So I was like, wow, how did this, like this? Literally, I just spoke to the guy today. So Now I think people will wake up. Wait, why is the government thinking about this? Well, what the heck's going on? So I think people now, you know, when serious players like that start doing stuff, I mean, Azhar, what's his name? The head of Azhar, Sheikh, starts with T, Tahir, or
Who?
the Grand Sheikh of Azhar. I've forgotten his name.
Al-Azhar University.
Al Azhar University, the main Grand Sheikh. I've forgotten his name. Someone will say it in the comments anyway. He's
Al-Qadri is not. Al-Qadri is not. Azhari. Yeah.
Al-Tayyib.
Ahmed al-Tayyib. Ahmed al-Tayyib.
Ahmed Tayyib, yes, yes. So, you know, he spoke about atheism. Would you believe it? He spoke about atheism, and in fact, he lifted up Sheikh Ojaidi's book, Sheikh Abdullah Ojaidi's book, and he said, you know, if you know about atheism, read this book. So we can see that, you know, right at the top, Islamic thinkers, right? I mean, Azhar is the oldest Islamic seminary in the world. They are thinking. Why would he be thinking about this topic? He clearly knows scientism, atheism, all this stuff is going to affect the Muslim world and is affecting the Muslim world in a big way. I just want to add one more thing about Egypt. This I think is, you know, important. There's a friend of mine who, he used to be an atheist. He became Muslim, then he moved with his family to Egypt, and now he just studies in Egypt and he's just living in Egypt, right? So he knows about atheism and he knows about Islam because he used to be an atheist and now he's an Islamic scholar and he graduated from Azhar. He said something very interesting to me. He's in contact with scholars in Egypt and they have their discussions, they have their, you know, their halaqah and stuff, and they have some closed room discussions. He said that the scholars in Egypt are basically saying this new atheism is more dangerous than the atheism that came with the communists. Because the atheism that came with the communists came with the identical arguments that the new atheists are using. Religion is immoral, consciousness is an illusion, design is, you know, challenged by law. Everything's the same, except communism never came with liberalism or these beautiful things, right? With these supposed temptations. Communism came with, you know, struggle of classes and all that kind of stuff, and poverty, essentially, because that's what communism led to. But when it comes to a new atheism, they came with their, you know, package of human rights, with their freedoms, with all these types of things. And they say a lot of people are being attracted to new atheism because of the packaging, as opposed to the way that is packaged during communism. So I think, you know, things are, you know, going to get picked up when they're going to be, you know, governments involved.
Inshallah, let's hope that it's for the good. Inshallah, we can only pray. Sami has asked a question and she's waited very patiently. Are there any efforts being made then to have our voice in the group of intellectuals worldwide? Which I think you've just answered. Do you want to add anything else to that?
You know, I already answered that, but I think one of the things which is happening, and I'm seeing this happen, and I'm really happy about it, is that Muslim intellectuals are connecting with each other. And in fact, we are finding each other on social media. I came across, you know, people with almost no following, but, you know, you go through their Facebook posts and you're like, man, this guy's really on it. So I think social media has really helped that. It's really helped people bring together. We don't have Balagh University. We need to have a Balagh University. Yeah. Balagh University, they come together and they're going to gel because they're under one roof. With us, through social media, we find each other. But there are still people out there who are doing good stuff, but they're not connected as part of our network yet. But that's something definitely, inshallah, we're going to be working on.
Inshallah, inshallah. Good. All right. There's a question about black magic and jinn. I'm not going to take that for this particular webinar. I think that's beyond our expertise for this particular session. Isa, Isa Salam. So I know Isa. He's asked, do you think folks working on philosophy of science and Islam should seek degrees in the hard sciences as to gain credibility in our communities based on your evaluation of Shabir Akhtar's situation? What do you reckon?
That's actually a difficult question to answer. In terms of purely answering this from a logical perspective, no, they don't need to. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you need to study, you know, zoology or genomics at a deep level in order for you to answer things which are not related to that. You're basically wasting your time. However, the argument is credibility, right? Practically, it'll give you that credibility, but it'll give you that credibility in the Muslim eyes publicly. Academically, that degree is useless. I mean, if you are trying to publish in a philosophy journal and you happen to have a background, you're doing something on phylogeny, right? But your actual background is paleontology and you've done some work on trilobites. there's no link between the two.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, it's a difficult one to answer.
I can add in the science religion field, which is a field that's kicking up. Definitely scientists who move into science religion, which is more humanities oriented, a lot of respect is given to scientists. So in that particular domain, you won't have that much of a loss of respect. For example, look at John Polkinghorne. So he was a theoretical physicist, right? Did very well, and then went on, became a priest, and then he started contributing a lot to science. In fact, I would say he'd be one of the founding fathers of science and religion as a field of study. He's one of the ones who shaped it very incredibly. So it may not work in other domains, but definitely in the work of science religion, I think it has a lot of traction going for it. Rabia is asking, kindly suggest some very basic or preliminary reads series for integrating scientism into Quranic chapters for practical implications. So I think there's a couple of points being raised here. Readings that can help them to that can be linked to the Quran somehow to kind of show what it entails and how this can be applied practically. So I think that those are three different points in there. So let's start with readings. What kind of books would you recommend on scientism, Subboor? I have a few in mind. Let's start with you.
I saw you post a book with an orange cover a few days ago. What was that?
Orange cover. Let me go on my Facebook.
You're recommending that one. I think I bought that one as well.
The Arabic book.
No. Is another one. I'll find
it. Science Wars. Science Wars. Is that the one?
Maybe. I think it was something to do with science and theology. Yeah, theology.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Theology. Yeah, maybe you can see that one. Do you remember you posted this one? Yeah.
So there's a couple of books that I bought in the past few weeks, but a good book is there's a handbook. There's an Oxford edited volume called Scientism. It has unfortunately a slightly partially nude photo, but that's why I don't want to share the photo. But that's a good book, and it's edited by people like Rick Peels. So that's a good book to start off with. There are quite a few in Scientism, but that's one that I'd strongly recommend. There's also one, Scientism, which I actually learned about from you, Subboor, a couple of years ago. It's the one written by that, I think, female philosopher. Do you remember the blue cover? You used to quote her a lot. It was a blue cover, and I forgot the...
the female philosopher, I can't remember her name.
Defending Science Within Reason. That's the one. Defending Science by Susan Hack.
Susan Hack.
Yeah. That's a good one. That's a very, very good one.
She has a very good talk on scientism, and she's also written a paper, which is, I think, something like 7 types of scientism, or I remember coming across this a few years back. Yeah, but she's written she's published a journal. She's published a paper in a journal on this.
So on that point, the key book for me is Scientism by Michael Stenmark. So those like differentiations you're talking about, the different kinds of scientism, he does that. It's an excellent book. It's one of the best books in the market on scientism. So those would be some references that I think that we'd recommend. Anything else comes to mind, Subboor? You want to go to the next point?
Yeah, I mean, I think what would be helpful is if you, after this webinar, if you just post those books again on your Facebook.
Actually, that's a good idea. I've been posting like the best books in philosophy of science, best books. So maybe books on scientism could be do. Okay, that's a good idea. Right. Good suggestion. And thank you to Rabia for that. So just like the second/third part of Rabia's question is, so let's say you do have all these books, right? How do you kind of practically convey these ideas? What would you do to kind of convey to kids, for example, that this is scientism in action?
So this is important. This is very important. I'm a big advocate of increasing our communication skills. So years ago, this goes back maybe 11 years ago. Wow, yeah, 11 years ago.
Wow, we're old, man.
Yeah. 11 years ago, I came across a book called Made to Stick by Dan and Chip Heath. That book was revolutionary. It literally will teach you how to take any complicated idea, simplify it, turn it into a story, turn it into an analogy, turn it into a parable, turn it into whatever, something that people will remember, and be very clear with that. I think one of the problems in the way that we communicate is that it's literally like a flood. It's like an avalanche. It's too much. And we forget, because we know an idea so well, because we read, because we are just in that world, we forget that people don't come from that background. So when you convey ideas, one of the things I like to do is make a simple point and convey it in a very basic way, and make sure people understand it before you move on, and then repeat yourself. Because one of the things I found surprising when I used to give talks some years back, the philosophy of evolution stuff, I thought I was giving a talk that was pretty basic. People that came up to me after that, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea. Like literally, they just, and I look back at that and I think, no, actually it was very simple. But it wasn't, because I was thinking from my perspective, if I gave you that talk, Shoaib, or somebody else from an academic background, they'd probably find it too basic. They'd probably watch it on ×2 and, do their laundry at the same time and juggle at the same time. They'd be like, this is too basic, it's simple. But when you're talking to the average person, they sometimes just don't know. Like even the way we say, but like technically this statement is true, right? The belief in God is not a scientific question. That's a true statement. That statement being true can still be misinterpreted by people saying, almost like, because it's not a scientific question, therefore it's not a valid question. People have all these types of assumptions. So it's almost like you're insulting Islam by saying, Allah is not a scientific question. Oh, what do you mean Allah is not a scientific question? People forget people are at a very different level. So I would say Made to Stick by Dan and Chip Heath is a good book. What else would be a good book? And there's another book by Dan and Chip Heath called something Change. You can read that book as an example of Made to Stick. How you can come up with examples. Yeah.
You should post this on Twitter once we finish this seminar. Post those 2 books on Twitter.
Yeah.
And tag Al-Balagh. The books that I mentioned were these ones. All right. We have another question by Talha. Don't you think the practical implementation of relations between Islam and scientism still lacks even in the literate Muslim, which mostly constitutes people in the medical field, STEM jobs? What do you reckon?
I don't understand the question. Is he just saying that we were primitive?
So scientism is not just something that's, permeating across lay people, even in the literate community, educated community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember I gave a talk at 𝐁𝐚𝐥𝐚𝐝𝐿 in Cambridge, and there was a Cambridge academic there, and he was really good at his craft, or whatever it was, something in biology, right? But clearly, people like him are just affected by scientism because they're really in the thick of it. And sometimes, and he was Asian, when you come from an Asian background, and a background that's seen as, people who are not really educated and stuff like that, and then you go deep into academia, you sometimes overcompensate. by being even more scientific in your thinking than other people. So yeah, I mean, I think it's layman and Muslims in STEM alike. I think we could say that. You could even put it this way, that sometimes simpler Muslims who aren't educated are more likely to be dismissive of science than people who do STEM.
Yeah. I agree with that. So there's quite a few questions that I think are not suitable for this webinar. So I do apologize if I'm skipping your questions. Hamza Jalal says, I would appreciate a chat or a lecture or even infographic on something that explicitly outlines where scientism and Islam agree, disagree, and are neutral. Decoding Scientism, which is a program that myself and Subboor developed. And we're working together to kind of, provide a map, like a lay of the land. And we've got 10 lessons that we will be covering. So you can see the subpoints in between, right? So you've got an introduction to the course. So what kind of things can you expect? What kind of objectives are we going to try and achieve here? We'll then go over some basic ideas about what science is. Believe it or not, even in philosophy of science, there's a whole division about what is pseudoscience. Where do you draw the line between science and pseudoscience? We'll also look at the role of new atheism in science. We've touched some of those things here. And then somebody mentioned, different kinds of scientism, which we've also looked at. We'll look into detail in this particular class, right? And then we'll also look at some of the limitations of scientism, because scientism is made to be believed as like the end all and be all. But even scientism has implications that draws upon on its limits. Methodological naturalism is something that Subboor touched upon, which is one of the biggest things I'd say in this area of science and religion. And interestingly, we had a conversation between the two of us about this. We also decided to incorporate intelligent design. Why and how is something that you will look forward to, hopefully, inshallah. Subboor is teaching that particular class. We will also be looking at scientific miracles. Again, that's something we briefly touched upon. And then finally, scientism and da'wah. So it's all well and good, for you to be able to go through the theory, but it's also important to be able to deliver this effectively. And this is where Subboor's experience comes in very handily, right? So he's been doing da'wah, mashallah, more than a decade, speaking to all kinds of people across the world, different tiers of society. And so he'll be helping you trying to draw the theory into practice. And then finally, the last lesson will be the two of us, where we will, field any questions that you may have for us. So this is as Subboor said, I don't think a program like this exists. What we're trying to do is kind of marry two worlds together. So the academic discourse, the da'wah discourse together, and trying to bring out the best of both into one platform. So that's the course that we're offering. We definitely look forward to seeing you. It's going to go in for 10 lessons. It'll be on Saturdays from 5 to 6:30 p.m. Subboor, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. One thing which I was actually talking to someone about this earlier on today, is you don't value anything unless it has essentially a struggle in it. So there's 10 lessons, you got to be disciplined, you got to sign up, you got to do these things. Only through that struggle do you value what you're getting. Nothing in life just comes for free. So, sometimes this happens at Speaker's Corner, happens other places. Can you just explain to me this evolution stuff? And I'm just standing there like, okay, you want me to in like 5 minutes? If you really want to understand something, you need to do it in a structured way. You need to get a pen and paper, memories in the elbow. You need to write, you need to think, you need to ask questions, you need to contemplate. That's how you understand stuff. There are people, and I'm not even kidding about this, there are people who go through our content, they go through our YouTube, our videos and stuff like this. 2-3 years down the line, they still haven't understood the first video, and we've made like 50 videos on this topic, because they're not willing to actually, those are trailers, right? They're not willing to do the actual learning in this structured way. And this is how you're going to retain information. You're not going to retain information when you're just watching stuff and just hoping for sound bites and this kind of thing. I'm really glad it's 3 months as well, because it's not like back to back. And what I would really do is make sure you get pre-recorded, pre-written questions that you bring to the next section, because one of the things which happens when you're delivering these types of courses, people think the most information that they're going to get, the most benefit they're going to get, is from the slides and the instructor there explaining the particular point. It's actually the Q&A. It's actually the Q&A where people get the most understanding of these topics. So I'll definitely recommend everybody to do this, sign up for this course, and I'll also post it out on my Twitter and other places for people to sign up as well, inshallah.
Inshallah. Perfect. So guys, that's pretty much our take on scientism that was intended to be conveyed in this webinar. We hope you got some glimpses with respect to what we have in the pipeline for this course. Of course, we can't spill all the beans. There's only so much we can do in 1 hour. But I hope this gives you some motivation, encouragement to sign up for the course. And of course, myself and Subboor will be taking questions as we get through the material. And again, this has been a finely designed course which puts together the theory and the practice together. And we're trying to combine our strengths and cover our weaknesses, at the same time bringing you the latest literature. So my action point after this webinar is I'll post like the 10 best books on scientism, and your action point is those 2 books by Dan and Chippy, right? Subboor?
That's it. And also, I just wanted to add something. I benefited a lot from Sheikh Muhammad al-Sharif, rahimahullah, who passed away last year. He's the founder of Al-Maghrib. So I used to watch his clips, I used to watch his videos, and he's very active on social media. I once decided, because he kept pushing for his course for people to sign up, and it's a paid course, the Visionaire course. And so what I did is I decided to actually sign up and pay. And I decided to sign up and pay because I wanted to actually take his advice and take things more seriously. And I signed up, and I didn't actually go through all of the content. That was just a mistake that I made, but I still did go through some of it. And what I learned, I actually applied, and it actually was beneficial. And I think one of the things why I actually paid more attention to that particular aspect is because I paid for the course. Because I actually, had login details, I had these things. So I think people sometimes think, okay, I'm going to get the juice of it if I just go through this stuff. Actually, and Shoaib knows this, I'm not getting paid for this, but I will tell my own family members to sign up for this, even though I could probably get free login. Because I know if they get something for free, they're not going to value it. They're literally not going to value it. And the amount of time and effort and energy that you have to put in putting together the slides and putting together the work, it's a full-time job. It is literally a full-time job. So
I'll just share something with you guys. So just to give you a sense, for one course, that's just a sample of the books that we could. I'm sure, Subboor, you have something similar like this in your office.
That's just one course. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. It's so true. So true. So yeah, definitely sign up, guys. This is something that's very important.
All right. Guys, Zotero, Shoaib, Zotero. I don't know what Zotero is. I'm assuming that's a Spanish word. My Spanish is not so good, so I'll take that as a compliment, inshallah. Husnul. So guys, thank you so much for listening to us. Subboor, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. And I just wanted to say, keep us in your du'as. Both of us are trying to work hard in our different ways to kind of uplift the ummah, academically, pedagogically, and this is just one of them. So if you are interested, please do sign up. If you have any questions, feel free to email the admin, and they'll come to me, and I'll be able to address them if need be. But yeah, more details will be coming out soon, and we hope we can see you in the next few weeks to come. Subboor, any last notes from your side?
Just wanted to say, we all love our children, for those of us who have children. And children nowadays are asking questions which are pretty much riddled with scientism. Because my daughters, they watch this thing called Peter Rabbit. Well, they used to, now they moved on to something else. And in Peter Rabbit, there's actually, I don't know if your kids watch this, Shoaib. If you
what is Peter Rabbit?
Peter Rabbit. There was a clip. I was going to take me some time finding it somewhere in my WhatsApp. It's literally an advertisement for scientism in Peter Rabbit. So look, the issues that me and Shoaib are talking about, they're not some abstract issues. These are things that are going to affect you and your children, and you need to be prepared for it. And it's better to be prepared for an opportunity and it doesn't come than an opportunity comes and you're not prepared. So you don't want to be in a situation where you're stumped by your 6-year-old asking you a question.
So
You don't know how to answer it.
I'll share a story, right? So my son Jonah, he can now read, right? So but we started talking about God at a very young age with him. And so I wanted to trick him, right? So he started noticing that all of his toys made in China, made in China, made in China, made in China, right? And I said, Jonah, you're also made in China. He's like, Daddy, no, I am made by God. MashaAllah. So that's the kind of confidence we should be inspiring at a young age to our kids, inshallah. But Subboor, thank you so much. Barakallah feek. Admin team behind the scenes, thank you for pulling this off. And for all the people participating, we hope to see you in the course. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Have a good day.